All right, thank you, Judy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully this all works out. And I have a brief PowerPoint to kind of go through. But just as a quick introduction, as Judy mentioned, my name is Jack Stanton. I am the Associate Director of Housing with the Regional Center of Orange County, and I've been with the Regional Center for now just over 22 years. So I do not use the word expert. Please just bear in mind that we all are still learning every day. So that there's a lot of stuff that changes. There's a lot of new stuff that goes on. And so I don't consider myself an expert by any means of that word. But I do want to kind of talk through living options. And so I know I was able to present to this group last year as well, and I really focused on kind of independent living. So tonight I was going to talk just about general living options and kind of cover the broad array of options and opportunities that are out there. Because I work at the Regional Center of Orange County, my talk is really focused on individuals that would already be eligible for the Regional Center system. So I know this group covers a broader range than just that. But I do believe that Adam's going to talk a little bit more about some other options after I speak. So I kind of like to start off with just our guiding principles. And when we look at our guiding principles as they focus on living options, this is really where we want to focus on the individuals that we serve. So back to our guiding principles, really where we want to focus is just ensuring that people have the right to make informed choices. This isn't just about where they live, but really about every opportunity that they have in their life. When we focus on living options, obviously we want to make sure that there's informed choice about where somebody wants to live and with whom they would live with. We want to ensure that culturally sensitive services and supports are provided so that everyone can make those informed choices, even if they're renting their own homes, if they own their own homes, where they're going to live and with whom they live. So also we want to be able to support families whose minor or adult children choose to remain in the family home. So we do have available resources to serve those individuals in their family home. We also want to ensure that the people that we serve live in homes where they receive quality care and can form relationships. So again, guiding principles of the Regional Center of Orange County when it comes to living options. If you are connected with the Regional Center, you can always look on our website to kind of get started in your search. When it comes to housing, there's a lot of different options and there's a lot of information. The stuff I'm going to go through is really just the tip of the iceberg. But if you go to our website at rcocdd.com, there's a lot more information there as well. We have a little kind of pamphlet booklet. It's all online, but we call it the guide to live, our guide to living arrangements. So you can find that on our website. Best place to get started is also just being able to talk with your friends, talk with parents, talk with caregivers, and talk with service providers. They're already doing the things that you might be interested in doing. So they do have a unique perspective that they'd be able to share as well. You want to make sure that you work with your service coordinator to develop a plan through the IPP. I'm going to go through what an IPP is and why it's important in just a few minutes. But you also always have to remember that not all services work for all people. So while I do always encourage folks to talk with other individuals, just please be aware that what might work for one individual is not necessarily guaranteed to work for you. So it's just to get perspective, but everyone needs to be able to make their own choice. So I mentioned the IPP, which is the individual program plan. And really where that starts is just meeting with your service coordinator and bringing in your circle of support. Your circle of support is really anyone in your life that's important to you and to help with the decision-making process. At that IPP, really that's your opportunity to determine what's going to work best for you and for meeting your unique needs. You always want to be as descriptive and detailed as possible when identifying those needs and preferences. So this is not the time to embellish or really kind of make yourself different than what is going on in your life. And it's not a time to really ignore some of the important things that are going on in your life as well. You want to make sure that you're honest. You want to make sure that you're descriptive, and you want to make sure that you're detailed, because that IPP is what's going to drive services, and that's what's going to be available to folks like myself or any one of our specialized resource coordinators. That's what we're going to be looking at. We don't always have the opportunity to talk face-to-face with you, so that IPP is really our guide, right? That's what we're going to be looking at to get to understand you as best that we can. So that IPP, as I mentioned, is going to drive your supports and services. And always keep in mind that that IPP can be updated at any time, but it's always going to be done at least once a year as per our guidelines, okay? But again, it does not mean that you couldn't call for an IPP meeting at any time throughout that year if something changes. It's important, very, very important that that IPP is current. Again, contains all relevant information regarding services and supports necessary for you. And you want to make sure that it's as factual as possible. So again, you don't want to hide things. There's nothing negative that can be put in an IPP. So from that IPP, that might entail a meeting with one of our specialists, right? One of our resource specialists. And when we're talking about looking for a place to live, the first thing that we want to do from the regional center standpoint is try to establish what we call the level of care. A level of care, please understand, this is not exact science. There is no written description of what a level of care, each level of care really truly means. What we're doing from a regional center standpoint is looking at the information that is presented through the IPP, through the service coordinator, through other service providers that may be working with you at this point in time. And we want to take that information and we want to try to plug it in as best we can into what would typically be related as a staffing ratio or an amount of assistance that somebody might need in any piece of their life. At Regional Center of Orange County, we really look at this as sort of an interdisciplinary team approach, right? So what that means is we're gonna be looking at your medical status. If you have any kind of health needs or health issues that need to be addressed where you're living, we want to know that, we wanna be able to look at that. We're gonna take into consideration your mobility skills, whether somebody might be in a wheelchair, whether somebody just might need some basic hand-over-hand assistance when they're walking, maybe somebody there for safety issues, whatever it is, we wanna be able to consider that. We're going to look at your communication abilities. We're going to look at the intensity of the supports that are needed to serve somebody safely within the community. We're going to look at your level of independence within the community. So is somebody able to be on their own, or does somebody need an individual to help them at all times? Then we're going to look and see what available options are out there. And these, again, are going to be driven by the individual's needs. So when we establish that level of care, really we're looking at the amount of staff that's going to be available within a certain setting. And then we're going to take that and help identify the available resources, any options that are going to be out there, or settings within our community that might meet your needs based on your request. So once we've done that and we are looking at referrals, just please be aware that all referrals for our services, so again, for regional center services, are going to be generated through that actual regional center, okay? Regional centers are mandated to ensure that that referral is appropriate, that they're always going to be in good standing, and that they're able to meet the individual's needs, right? So kind of going back to what I was saying in the beginning, if you talk to a friend of yours and they say, hey, I live in this setting or in this home, I really want you to come and live with me. Well, we may not see that as an appropriate referral. They may not be able to manage your specific medical needs. They may not offer enough staffing. They may not be in good standing with us, and they may not be able to accept referrals. So just bear in mind, that's the reason for referrals going through the regional center directly. Also, regional center services are going to be reviewed and determined to be appropriate with the ID team, and then regional center approval comes later once somebody's ready to take advantage of those services. So your regional center service coordinator is going to consult with an appropriate resource group to help identify potential vendors. They're going to help coordinate referrals, and then they're going to follow up with any additional information that's needed until an agreement can be reached by all parties. This is really important because, again, we're talking about the person that we serve, the vendor, the family, the regional center, so the ID team as a whole. There has to be mutual agreement before a service can be initiated. So if I'm the individual receiving the services and I'm choosing a service provider, that service provider also has to be willing to serve me at the same time. As long as we have that agreement, then we can move forward. Services typically are going to begin once that vendor has received an approved purchase of service. So you always want to make sure that the placement date or the start date of the service is identified well in advance with the service coordinator so that they can make sure that they are obtaining their approved purchase order so that the service provider can be funded for the actual service that they're going to be provided. When folks are living outside the family home, we do review those supports and services on a quarterly basis or as needed, but at a minimum on a quarterly basis. So we go from once a year meeting somebody in their family home to 4 times a year when they move out of the family home. I'm going to back up just a second because I had mentioned a resource group, and some folks may be wondering what the heck does that mean? So we have resource groups to basically help us specialize in all the specific areas of services. So that does include living options. We have somebody that oversees licensed living options. We have somebody that does unlicensed services such as supported living or independent living. We have a day program specialist. We have a behavioral specialist, so somebody oversees behavioral services. And then we have several other different specialists. So we have an educational specialist still. So they really focus on specific areas within the regional center service system. So looking at what options are available. Obviously, we want to look at the least restrictive setting that meets an individual's needs, right? So that's going to vary from person to person. That can mean living with your family, right? It can mean living with a spouse or a loved one. It could mean living in your own home. You could have a rental unit, a home, or an apartment. You may choose to live alone. You may choose to live with roommates. You might want to just live with a friend of yours. You may want to live in a licensed group home. We also have adult family home agency settings. So I'm going to kind of go through those in a little bit more detail here in just a minute. But just to remind, services are really going to be developed around the needs of the individual, regardless of the setting, right? So really why this is key is because services can change over time, and most likely they are going to change over time, right? Because what we need when we're in our 20s is not going to be the same thing that we need when we might be in our 50s or our 60s. So no service is truly meant to be lifelong, even though we do speak about that. It's really not meant as a lifelong service because your needs change over time. So the services are going to continue, even though they might not be lifelong, they're going to continue as long as they remain appropriate, and they do have the ability to change with your needs up until a certain point. So the first thing that we want to look at is what we call licensed options, right? And so these are going to be a community care facility, and these are what we commonly refer to as either a CCF or an ARF, you might hear. CCF being community care facility, ARF being adult residential facility. These are all going to be licensed through the state of California, the Department of Community Care Licensing. They're going to be vendored at the same time that they're licensed by the regional center to provide services for up to 4 people. And so this is a little bit new, new being the last several years. The maximum capacity for any of our group homes is going to be 4 people on the community care license side. These are funded directly through the regional centers. There is a share of cost for the resident that comes from SSI or wages, and the share of cost is going to be the same. The regional center funding changes based upon the designated level of care of each home. Right now, we're in kind of a transition stage. So they are changing the levels that you might have traditionally heard. We are moving into what we're going to be calling level 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you'll no longer hear about a level 4C or a level 4I. You're going to hear levels 2 through 6. I'm not going to go into those just because, again, it's pretty similar to what we have before. It's just a new way of saying it. The funding and the staffing in each home is going to increase incrementally every time you move up a level. So level 2 being the least restrictive, the least amount of staff, and the level 6 being the most restrictive, most amount of staffing. All homes are also going to have single bedrooms, although I will admit that some of our older homes are going to still probably have some shared rooms, mainly in our level 2, some of our level 3 homes that have been around for years. You may still find shared bedrooms. You may still find some homes that are over 4 beds as well. But again, these are homes that have been in existence for 20 or 30 years now. A lot of them are changing into that 4-bed model, but we still do have some 6-bed homes with shared bedrooms. As I mentioned, homes are all going to be designated a level, and that really corresponds to the amount of staffing. So I know I use the word ratio, but really it's not even a ratio. The only time you can really talk about a ratio is in a level 2 home, which again is the least restrictive, because if they have 1 resident or 4 residents, they're always going to be providing what we call a basic level of staffing. And that basic staffing for 1 person up to 4 people is going to be 1 staff, 24 hours a day, 7 days per week, or essentially 168 staffing hours per week. We look at this week to week, so it's not a monthly basis. It's an actual weekly basis, so 52 weeks out of the year. Each week, they have 168 hours that they must be providing in a level 2 home. So it's typically going to be a 1-to-4 ratio, if you will. When we look up to the next level, a level 3, it's going to add a few additional hours per week above the basic 168 hours. Level 4, 5, and 6 then continue to add staffing every time you increase. In the old model, what would have been a level 6 4-bed home would have 312 hours of direct staffing, I believe, per week versus the 168 hours in a level 2. Our regulations have not changed, so there will be a new staffing amount once level 4, 5, and 6 gets changed within our regulations in the next couple of years. So that's why I won't get into it too much, because it's kind of, it has not changed yet, but we're really not using the old way of describing things either. Higher level homes, so level 4, 5, and 6 homes, also have additional hours built in per week for consultative support with outside specialists. So home might be able to bring in a behavioral specialist. They might be able to use an occupational therapist or a speech therapist, just depending on somebody's needs. The other type of licensed care homes that we have are what's known as intermediate care facilities, or ICF homes. These are also licensed, but they are licensed through the Department of Healthcare Services. So a little bit different. These are developed to serve up to 6 people. So these are going to be 6-bed homes. These are going to have 2 individuals sharing a bedroom, is going to be most likely the norm in any ICF facility. Please understand that the regional center, although we refer and we monitor to these homes, we do not fund these homes directly. So they don't necessarily have to meet the same standards as our community care licensed facilities. ICF homes are designed to provide a multidisciplinary team approach to the residents' needs. So a little bit different from the community care side, which is really just the easiest way to understand is that is a board and care model. They provide a roof over somebody's head, and they provide care hours to ensure that their needs are met throughout the week. In an ICF home, you get still the board model. So you get the room, you get the roof over your head, you get the care and the staffing, but you also get a little bit different or a little bit enhanced level of support and services. Because really what ICF care homes are mandated to provide is going to be this range of specialties. So they might be offering occupational therapy, speech therapy, recreational therapy, medical supports. They might do hearing supports. They might have PT. They might have a psychiatric component as well. So there is a range of specialties that are all going to be going in to support each of those residents based on their individualized needs. There's 2 types of ICF homes. These are going to be designated as either a habilitative model, which is an ICF DDH, or a nursing model, which then is designated an ICF DDN. And again, these are going to be based on the residents that can be served in the home. So the main difference is that in an N level home, N being for nursing, that home is going to provide up to 8 hours per day of LVN level care and 1 hour per week of RN oversight. So you do have a nursing component that does not exist within a community care facility. So these types of homes may address some acute needs, including G-tubes, IV medications, ADL dependency, frequent repositioning, things like that. Again, they are vendored by the regional center, but they're funded via Medi-Cal and Medicare. Next, we'll look at certified programs. So these are not licensed, but they are certified by the Department of Developmental Disabilities. And really what falls under this category is known as a family home agency or adult family home agency. We also refer to these as AFHA or FHA. You might be familiar with those terms. Again, they're certified, so not licensed, and they may care for 1 or 2 adults in a quote unquote family setting. So this is really a hybrid type model between a group home and living independently, okay? They are supervised by a licensed family home agency, but not licensed in the same way as a group home. That family home agency is vendored through the regional center in order to provide those supports through the family home provider. So I know this is kind of confusing, but just bear in mind, regional center refers to the AFHA or the FHA family home agency. The family home agency contracts with family home providers in the community. That family home provider then provides the support in their home to you as service recipients, okay? This is where it gets really, really unique and really fun for family home agency services. Because of the way it's set up, you as the individual end user really get a lot of choice in this setting. So meaning you are the one that's saying, I want to live with a married couple. I want to live with a married couple with 1 child or no children, or I want to live with a single adult. I want to live with 2 other individuals that are around my age. I want to have a pool in the backyard of the family home. I want to live in this city. I want to live in a 2-story house. Really, the list is as big as your imagination can make it, okay? So you can really create an ideal setting. I'm going to warn you, though, the more specific you are with your choices and your requests, the longer it may take for that family home agency provider to find a family in the community and match with you, okay? So it can take a long time to set this up, but once it's set up, if it's done slowly and methodically and done right, it's a great setting that can last a lifetime. Regional Center, again, funds directly for these supports. There is still the share of costs through an individual's SSI or wages if they're working. That funding does follow the community care facility rates up until 2025. In the next 2 years, AFHA rates are actually going to be carved out of the CCF rate structure. So not that this is anything that you all really need to worry about, but ultimately for the Regional Center, we used to base this on the same funding that we would do in a group home. Now AFHA is going to have its own rate structure in our community. I mentioned 2025 because we are in the midst of a rate increase happening here with the state of California that ends at the beginning of July in 2025. So we still got to wait another 3 years to get there. But once we do, we hope to have better funding streams within our community services. These family providers are going to be fingerprinted, and they do receive a criminal background checked through the state, much like a licensed group home. But again, the agency themselves does not get fingerprinted. It's not the same. But that family provider where you might be living is fingerprint cleared, and they do have a criminal background check through the Department of Developmental Services, who gets notices if somebody's fingerprints get pulled due to an incident with law enforcement. I'll leave it at that. Now, moving on to community options. So again, from certified, moving into the community. So anyone over the age of 18 who wants to live in their own homes, we do have supports that are available. And I talked about this a little bit last year as well, but we kind of start with that independent living services model, or what we call ILS. This is really a minimal amount of support for an individual in the community. We're looking at maybe 5 hours up to 25 hours per month. So somebody who is in independent living is really going to be independent. Here you're really looking at a training model. So there's specific goal areas that independent living provider is going to be looking at working on with you. So that could be cooking, cleaning of your apartment, shopping in your environment, right, in your community, planning out menus, planning out meals and doing meal preparation, working on money management skills, accessing public transportation, health and hygiene needs. There's a category for self-advocacy training, independent recreation, the use of medical and dental services, so accessing your medical resources in the community. Community resources, accessing those community resources, and or home and community safety. So your training has to fall within one of those areas, multiple areas, but again, that's where those 25 hours per month might be going to work on, okay? In this setting, an individual is going to have to provide for their own needs. This includes rent, it includes the furnishings for your apartment, it includes your food, your recreation, your cell phone, your, I was going to say bus pass, but depending on if you're working, we may still be providing for transportation for you. But if you're not working, you may be providing your own transportation. What the Regional Center is going to be able to fund is that support agency, right? So we fund the staffing only. So here somebody may need to work, right? Because living on your own is very expensive. You may be looking at shared housing. So having a roommate, 1 or 2 roommates is going to help. Also, we always suggest having a housing voucher, right? Living in some type of subsidized housing. I haven't looked recently, but I know rents in Orange County for a 1-bedroom are exceeding anywhere from $1,600 on upwards of $2,000 a month, 2 bedrooms even more than that. So ultimately, we understand that Orange County is highly unaffordable for most. That's where those housing subsidies really come into key. ILS can be provided in the family home, so just be aware of that. You don't have to live outside the family home to receive independent living services. We either do this as sort of an ongoing training or a skills development model, or if you say, hey, I'm looking at moving out in the next few months, we might do some intensive ILS in that family home to really help you move into the community and prepare to make that move, right? You may need to establish a bank account really quick. You may need to figure out where it is that those resources are going to be in the community where you're going to be moving to. Please note that ILS is a face-to-face service. So the staff are going to be present with you at all times when they're providing those supports. This is a training model. It's not really meant to be a continuous supervision model. That's why you're looking at just about 20-25 hours on average, because really it's training to get you to exceed to the next step. The individual is going to have an ISP, or this is an individual service plan with that vendor, which is going to reflect your needs. It's going to identify the goals to be accomplished, and it's going to have a plan to meet those objectives and meet those goals. The hours of support that are provided in the community are going to be based on those ISP goals. So what happens if I need more than 25 hours a month of support? Really then what we'd be looking at is called supported living services, or SLS. SLS can be anywhere from an hour a day up to 24 hours a day if that's what's needed to help support you. Unlike ILS, which is that training model, really SLS, the main goal here is to support your individual needs within your home and your community. So we are not limited to specific training areas under supported living services. They're really just meant to assist you with your overall daily needs. Again, similar to ILS though, you are providing for your own needs, meaning rent, food, utilities, all your activities, all of those good things. All regional center can do is fund for the support. So again, if it's an hour a day, if it's 24 hours a day, that's what the regional center is going to be funding based on your needs, okay? However, in supported living services, there are some requirements. One of those requirements is that the individual must be able to utilize generic resources. The vast majority of those generic resources fall under what we call in-home support services, or IHSS. So an individual who's receiving supported living in the community or supported living services must take advantage of that generic resource. They must apply for SLS, or IHSS within 5 days of moving into an SLS setting, okay? Once those hours are awarded, if any, they are backed out of the supported living services that regional center funds, and the generic resource supplements the hours for an individual. Same with ILS, SLS is also considered to be a face-to-face service. So if you're looking at living on your own, and if you're looking at supported living services, there's several areas to look, but really what we want to make sure that people focus on is going to be medical and medication information. Are the supports that are being provided sufficient to address your medical concerns? If there's behavioral considerations to take note of, are the supports going to be sufficient? Do you require personal care transfers, toileting, feeding help? All of that then basically translates into staffing. Safety emergency procedures, are they in place in the community? Are there support alternatives that might be able to be utilized instead of a face-to-face staff? Could this be a medication planner, a medical planner, phone check-ins, and a medication dispenser, for instance? If somebody just needs help taking medications, instead of having a staff person there to dispense that med, perhaps we can use a medication dispenser device. Takes the place of the staff and gives you a little bit more independence. We want to make sure that the IHSS hours are maximized. We want to make sure that there's natural supports, and that if those natural supports want to be part of somebody's life, that they are allowed to do that. That can include family, friends, neighbors, really whoever you like. Is there the use of technology, right? So some folks might need a door opener. Does that door opener work, and is it in the right setting for you? Speakers in the home, there's a lifeline system as well. We want to make sure that that technology is available. We want to make sure that you have adequate financial resources, right? That might indicate then the need for shared housing. We need to make sure that we're able to access public transportation, because that's going to be our major ability to access our community. Also, if we want to have unsupervised time, if we want to have different activities, and do we need overnight supports, we want to make sure that all that is going to be built into that supported living service from day one. Things can always change over time, and those supports can always change. But again, we want to make sure that we look at all of these things as we're developing that service initially. I'm just going to touch really briefly on service providers, because I think this is also important for folks to know. That really services are going to be delivered to people within the identified settings, right? And so that identified setting comes from the IPP, right? All of our service providers are going to be vendored through, for us, really I say local regional center, but we're talking about Orange County. So any service provider in Orange County is going to be vendored by the regional center of Orange County. What that means is that they are subject to Title 17 regulations specific to their service type. So there's Title 17 regulations for day services, supported living services, residential services, you name it, it's in Title 17. They might also have other applicable regulations, but for regional centers perspective, we're going to focus on Title 17. Regional centers then are mandated to monitor our vendors on a consistent basis. So a lot of times folks ask, well, who's watching this service provider? How do we know that they're not taking advantage of folks? I will share this, and this is always a scary thing to hear. We don't know, but we are monitoring those individuals at all times. And if we see something, we definitely do want to address it as quickly as possible. We look at it making sure that they're in compliance with the regulations. So our service coordinators, again, as I mentioned, for folks living outside the family home, you're going to have quarterly visits. We also do quality assurance reviews of our group homes, of our supported living programs, of our AFHA programs. They do announced and unannounced at least twice a year. We also look at special incident reporting, and our requirements with special incident reports may lead to additional visits. So you might have an additional visit by your service coordinator. You might have additional visits by QA staff or other specialists in our community. We then can impose sanctions if there are issues in terms of compliance. Sanctions can be imposed by the regional center. The vast majority of these are known as referral moratoriums, right? So that's our number one type of sanction, would be a freeze on referrals until anything that needed to be addressed by that service provider gets addressed to our satisfaction. So as kind of a snapshot, and this is as of June, so as of this month, we have approximately, I think this is accurate, almost 363 community care facilities for adults. We currently have 14 community care facilities for children under the age of 18. Unfortunately, the adults, they are increasing. Our children's homes are decreasing. Most of our children's homes are actually fairly old in terms of our community, and their population is aging into the adult world, and so they are now transitioning to adult facilities. We do have 82 ICF-DDH programs for adults and children. We have 42 ICF-DDN programs for adults and children. We have 40 independent living services vendors, and again, these serve adults over the age of 18. We have 38, might have 39, I believe one agency did get vendored this month, individuals providing the supported living services, again, to folks over the age of 18. And we have 4 family home agencies that also serve adults over the age of 18. So independent living, supported living, and AFHA is only for individuals age 18 or over. Group homes could be children and adults. So just please keep that in mind. So that was kind of a snapshot of Orange County and our services when we talk about living options. Just want to kind of remind you, folks, as I pass the baton to Adam here, services are always designed to meet individuals' needs, right? That's our number one goal. Those services can change over time as individuals' needs change. No service is really meant to be forever, and really that relates to the fact that services should be able to change with your needs as they change over time. If you're looking for more information, I'm going to just refer you back to your service coordinator, really as a starting point. So from here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Well, hello, everybody. And Judy, thank you for inviting me to speak with the group tonight. And thank you, Jack, for being here. And I want to start off just by kind of reintroducing myself. So I'm Adam Gottdank. I'm the Director of Disability Support Services for North Orange Continuing Education. We are part of the North Orange County Community College District, which has 3 college entities. Many of you will probably know Fullerton College and Cypress College. We are the 3rd college institution. We are North Orange Continuing Education, and we do a lot of things different than the credit colleges, Fullerton and Cypress. And I wanted to just to give you an idea of some of the things that we do, just so that you kind of know who I am, because this is what I do every day. We have college classes for adults with disabilities. We have 5 programs that help students with disabilities get employment. We have 4 or 5 programs to help students take inclusive credit and non-credit instruction in our college district. We offer bus mobility skills training for so people can learn how to ride public transportation. We have neurodiversity labs on all of our campuses. We are not a single campus school. We have an Anaheim campus where I'm at presently, and we have our campus that's adjacent to Cypress College and a campus that's adjacent to Fullerton College. And we offer distance education and distant or online services as well. We do a whole lot of things, but the presentation today isn't about that. But I wanted to share with you. So I've been here for 17 years at North Orange Continuing Education. And prior to that, I was working with Jack actually at Regional Center of Orange County for 10 years as part of their administrative team. And when Judy approached me, asked me if I might want to do a presentation on living options. Well, first of all, yes, yes, and yes. I love making presentations and talking about resources and services. And then I said to Judy, but why aren't you getting Jack to do the presentation? And I know that Judy really, I so appreciate working with her closely over the last few years. And I know that she really loves a lot of things that I do. And so I appreciated her asking me to present. And for the most part, I could have presented some of the, many of the things that Jack presented, but I haven't been at Regional Center for 17 years. So there are always new things. And I was just thinking as Jack was going through things like the community care facility level changes, the fact that AFHAs are now going to have their own rate system. These are all things that I'm not in the loop on. And so I think I could have done a pretty good job presenting living options, but you would have missed out on some of the things that Jack knows that I just do not. And so I'm really grateful that Jack was here to present living options for tonight. And I want to say something. I really enjoy presenting. And I think, you know, I have some benefits that a lot of other folks don't have. And so Jack works for Regional Center. I used to work for Regional Center, but I haven't worked for them for a very long time. And I've had a lot of experience working with a lot of the agencies, Department of Rehabilitation, Social Security Administration, CalOptima, County of Orange, Adult Services for Mental Health. And I also have family members with disabilities. I have a broad range of experience. And I don't really have to worry a lot about, you know, getting things perfect. I can speak to all of you from my heart and from the knowledge that I have and the experience that I have over a lifetime. And I don't really have to worry if I get it wrong. If I get something wrong, I can say, oh, whoops, something changed, I didn't know it. And, you know, I can be corrected by somebody like Jack. So I think one of the benefits of me being able to talk with you all tonight is to be able to just be frank and honest about a lot of things that I've seen. So I've had people in my, with disabilities in my life, my whole life. I've had family members, and I've been working in the field my whole life. So I supported people who wanted to work in grocery stores because I worked for grocery stores for a lot of years. And then I've worked in high schools and mental health hospitals, and then Regional Center, a special education research lab, and now here at the college district. And so I just want to say it's really easy for me to talk about all the things from an advocacy standpoint, because I can just tell you what I see and what I think and what I've become aware of. And it's really easy. And for me, it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to talk about a few things, and it may be the next couple slides may be, why is he talking about this when we're talking about housing? And I'm not really going to talk about eligibility for Regional Center, eligibility for Department of Rehabilitation, or for County of Orange Adult Mental Health. I want to share with you some observations, because after being at Regional Center for 10 years and being out here for 17 years, I have spoken with a lot of families about a wide range of topics. And I have to be really honest with a lot of the things that I see and hear, and the way I've worked with a lot of families over the years. So I'm going to share with you some things about eligibility, some eligibility issues. And I'm not going to do a deep dive on eligibility, and I'm not going to try to hit on every possible issue that could be related to eligibility. But in meeting with families day in and day out for all these years, there's a lot of misperceptions and a lot of things that happen that people don't understand. So if you'll bear with me for a few minutes, I'm going to give some examples of things, and whether this applies to your situation or doesn't apply to your situation, what I want you to take from it is that, are you really sure that the information that you have is accurate? Because it is always worth a reality check. And I'm going to give you some issues that have impacted eligibility for Regional Center. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about, if you're not eligible for Regional Center, what then? I'm going to get to that towards the end. But if you are eligible for regional center, along with some of the resources I'll share with you at the end, you're going to have access to just better services. I mean, with all the independent living services, supported living services, adult family home, with even the facilities, the community care facilities, intermediate care facilities, there's just so much more available. So if you have tried to become eligible and haven't become eligible, well, honestly, you may not be eligible. That is a reality. And I've met lots of people who were hoping to be eligible for regional center and were not, or that tried to become eligible for regional center and did not get eligible. But I have met a lot of people who thought they weren't eligible for regional center. And there's a wide range of reasons. I won't hit on all of them tonight, but I'm going to give you some really good examples. And I just want you to be aware. And, you know, applying for services, planning to move into an independent living situation or a community care facility, it's all time-consuming stuff that takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort, and I want you to be prepared for that. So first of all, here's an example. I have had not one or two people or families come to me and say, I contacted a regional center but got denied, and they had never been through a process to be considered for eligibility. I have probably come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of families who come and say, I got denied from regional center. And I ask for more information about that. And they might say something like this. Well, I called regional center. I talked to somebody on the phone. They told me I wasn't eligible. And so I'm not eligible. And I'm like, wait, you didn't go through an intake process? You didn't have somebody evaluate, do an assessment, look at records and meet with you? No. Well, I'm here to tell you, you haven't been denied. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be eligible, but if you called somebody from regional center and you came to the conclusion on the phone that you're not eligible, you don't know. You don't know. But you haven't started the process. And that doesn't mean that the person on the other end is giving you bad information. So if you, for example, call the regional center and you say, I want to be eligible for a regional center, I have a learning disability, or I'm calling for my daughter, my son, they have a learning disability. Well, the person on the other end is going to go, well, regional center doesn't serve individuals with learning disabilities. And then you're going to think that you've been denied, but you haven't been. You gave them some information and the person on the other end was trying to give you really good information back. But if your loved one or you have something that is a developmental disability that would be eligible for regional center, you haven't communicated that to regional center. That's just one example, one simple example. A lot of times I'll have people really frustrated with the regional center. Now, I'm focusing a little bit on regional center tonight, but these are the same types of discussions I have with people about any of the agencies. The reason I'm focused on regional center today is just, I'm going to circle back to this at the end of the presentation, but if you are eligible for regional center, you're going to be eligible for even more resources. That's why I'm doing some focus on this right now. So I have folks being really frustrated with the regional center because they think they've asked to be eligible. They think they've been denied, but they didn't maybe give the regional center all the information the regional center was looking for. They didn't close the loop with regional center on things that the regional center was asking for. They didn't provide records. There's a lot of miscommunication that occurs, and then people think they've been denied when they haven't been denied. So I'm here to tell you, if you haven't been through an intake process and regional center hasn't given you a denial in writing, then you haven't been through an intake process and you haven't been denied. That doesn't mean that you're going to be eligible, but you can't say you've been denied eligibility when you haven't even gone through the process. And going through the process you may find frustrating. Knowing that ahead of time hopefully will help with patience and that sort of thing. Another kind of related issue is not actively listening to what people are telling you. And this could be any agency. This could be County of Orange Mental Health. This could be Department of Rehabilitation. But if you're not actively listening to what people are saying, you're going to miss critical information. And that's easy to do because anytime you apply for any agencies, it can feel overwhelming. It can be too much information and confusing. But I have on dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times now, had families who think they're demanding something from a certain agency. It could be regional center or somebody else. And the agency they really want is another agency. So they're asking for something from regional center, but it's really Department of Rehabilitation that has what they need. I have families who confuse regional center and Department of Rehabilitation. And so actively listening to what people are telling you is going to be really, really important, or else you're just going to miss things, and you're going to feel like you're being denied. You're going to feel like people are not giving you good information, but you have to actively listen to what people are saying. Here's a few other things related to eligibility that I think it's important for people to understand. And again, take this as, these are examples. There's more than this. Okay, regional center and many of the other agencies are deficit-based eligibility. Now that's person-centered, right? Well, it almost sounds funny because the system runs on person-centered processes, and that's true of regional center and Department of Rehabilitation. If you come into the community college system, it's true of the community college system. It's true of the K-12 system. But to become eligible, you have to show deficits, and that is so, opposite person-centered, right? It's like, I want to talk about what my loved one can do. I don't want to focus on what my loved one can't do. But the reality is, where sometimes people have some problems with an eligibility process, is that they come and then they start talking about all the things their loved one can do, which we all want to know, and we do want to hear that, but they leave out the things that they really struggle with, or don't share enough information about, my daughter is this age and she's able to do these things, but not able to do these things. It is really important going through eligibility to talk about deficits. And I wish it was a perfect world and we didn't have to talk about deficits, but we do. And so when you call regional center and go through an intake process, if you're not really clear about things that your loved one can't do, then you're going to be found ineligible, even if your loved one truly would be eligible if regional center had all that information. Another thing that comes up is that sometimes assessments are not accurate for whatever reasons. You may bring assessments to the regional center and it doesn't list an eligible diagnosis, or maybe it doesn't list any deficits that would be considered factors that would help somebody be eligible for regional center. And I'll give you a couple of concrete examples here. This used to happen a lot more often in many years ago, but it still happens sometimes. Sometimes the records show speech and language disability instead of autism. And so if you present regional center with speech and language, they might say, well, that's not one of the developmental disabilities. But if you talk about, my loved one has autism, and by the way, they have a variety of speech and language deficits, oh, that makes more sense. Maybe eligible for regional center. Or I can't tell you how many times families call the regional center and say they have a learning disability when they mean they have an intellectual disability. Well, again, in a perfect world, would much rather use probably learning disability than intellectual disability. But again, if you don't call the regional center and say an area of disability that would be eligible, they're going to say that you don't have an area of eligibility, and we're not going to make you eligible. Something to keep in mind. Cultural differences and other kind of societal factors, understanding the process. I can't tell you how many times I met with families who really just have a difficult time understanding the process. And it's understandable because it is overwhelming. And this isn't just regional center. Eligibility for anything is overwhelming. And oftentimes families are trying to get resources from different agencies all at the same time, trying to get services from Social Security, from Cal Optima, from Department of Rehabilitation, from regional center. It's overwhelming. Understanding the process is just really, really difficult. There are language barriers, and that gets in the way of understanding process. It also gets in the way of communicating, to the regional center or any other agency what you want them to know. Maybe with language barriers, maybe somebody doesn't really understand to say intellectual disability or autism, and they say learning disability, learning difficulties. My child struggled in school. And so language barriers really can present, can really interfere with getting eligible. Language and assessments, you know, I will give you an example of something that I've probably seen 100 times here in the college district over the last 17 years. I will have somebody who is, they're Latino family, and they've had an assessment, and they brought that assessment to the regional center, and they were made non-eligible. And the assessment said they had a learning disability. And the reason it had listed as a learning disability was that they used this particular non-verbal assessment to evaluate for intellectual disability, and the person scored too high on that instrument, above what would be eligible for regional center. And then when I've looked at some of these cases, sometimes it's accurate, but there's been other cases where when you looked at other assessments that were maybe more traditional assessments for intellectual disability, the student scored in that range. Well, what's happening is that the schools, and this is meant to be a positive thing, they want to take bias out for language, and so they come up with a nonverbal assessment. And those assessments are good. I'm not really complaining about the assessment, but if somebody who is comes, you know, to services with a different language, and then they go and do a nonverbal assessment, and that assessment seems like it the outcome is that the points are a lot higher on that assessment than would be on a more traditional test for intellectual disability. Then they're going to the regional center, and regional center say, well, you have a learning disability, so you're not eligible. And what I have found is that a lot of times it's families who also have language barriers, and so they have a difficult time advocating for themselves, and then it becomes a barrier to eligibility. So a couple of things that happen, sometimes there's fear of accessing services. There are families that are worried about being deported or having their loved ones taken away from them because they don't understand the system. They don't understand that, you know, if you become eligible for a regional center, you're not going to be taken away from your family, or that, you know, you're not going to be deported, and regional center is not going to report you to be deported. But those are real fears that people have. Okay, now I apologize. This wasn't the theme of the night, but this, I'm going to circle back because you're going to see that this can be a real big issue to housing. Okay, so I'm going to piggyback on some of the things that Jack shared, and planning. So I want to tell you that planning is the biggest thing for any of these housing options, whether it's independent living or moving into a community care facility or AFHA. I have experienced, both in my days at regional center and here at the college district, a lot of people who think the process should move a lot faster, or they start moving down this path because there's a crisis and their loved one needs to move for whatever reasons. And regional center actually is pretty good at responding to crisis and finding solutions. But you're not going to have the ideal solutions if you're not going to be spending time to plan for the changes. Well, I love person-centered planning, and the idea of getting what your loved one needs and wants in the IPP, because the IPP it's a legal document, it's a guiding document, it's the thing that says, okay, we are all getting around the table, and we're gonna my loved one, they're gonna talk about what their dreams are for their future, what they want to do in their living arrangements, what kind of work they want to do, things that are important in their life. They're going to talk about that, and we're going to capture it in the IPP. And then that's going to guide services in how we move forward. So it is, I'm not an advocate of a 50-page IPP or a 20-page IPP. It's not the length that matters. It's getting the critical information in there that matters. The things about the person's choice, what they want, who's going to support them, and how they're going to get it done. It's really critical to use the IPP as a guiding document to for your loved one to go down the housing path that they want to go down. Here's another thing. When your loved one is moving out of your house for the first time, no matter what situation they move into, it's a major life change. And how many times have you heard that? But you know, you graduate from high school, you go to college, major life change. You get a new job, major life change. You move, major life change. Well, your loved one who has a disability moving out of your house for the first time, that's a huge life change, major life change. And it's going to take a lot of planning to do it right. And so you're going to want to, you know, ideally you're planning years ahead of time, but certainly you want to give plenty of time. And if you want agencies like Regional Center and Social Security and CalOptima to really be supportive of you in the process, getting started early is going to be really important. And you know what? It may take a lot of meetings. And the really great service coordinators know that, and they're going to prep you for that. And other folks that may be a little less patient may not be as interested in having a lot of meetings. But you know what? Having a lot of planning meetings and updating the IPP as needed are going to be really important. You know, your loved one may go through years where, you know, meeting with Regional Center once a year is fine. But there might be a year where meeting with Regional Center 7 times is what is needed. And that's okay. Don't be afraid to ask for multiple meetings. It does take a lot of effort. Okay. So here's another thing. You know, one of the biggest things I recommend, don't talk about money. Don't talk about dollars. That's the Regional Center's worry. That's other agencies' worry. You want to establish what your loved one needs. That's the important part about the person-centered planning process. What are their goals? What are their dreams? What do they want to do in the future? How are they going to get there? And how are we as an IPP team, a person-centered planning team, going to get together and plan it out and make it happen? When people start talking about dollars, it often leads into conversations that are not pleasant and honestly not really that helpful. So focus on your loved one's needs and what they want for their future. Facilities. You know, facilities, you can move into a facility today if there's an opening. But if you want to find a facility that is really great for your loved one, and that's the road you want to go, and I'll let you know my bias ahead of time. I'm a big independent living advocate. So I have, in my school, we have about 1,200 students with disabilities. I have any given year, 600 to 700 students with intellectual disabilities or autism. And I will tell you, 90% at least of my students are great candidates for independent living. I'm a big proponent of independent living. But if you're going to look at facilities, here's what I have for you. There are some facilities that are phenomenal. I'd eat off their floor. They're so clean. The care providers are wonderful. There's other facilities that there's just no way I would ever live in their house or send a loved one to live in their house. There's a lot of great facilities out there. If this is the road you're going to go down, there's good ones, but it's going to take time, and you're going to look at a lot of facilities, and you're going to have to be patient. Adult family home agencies. I just love this model. It's a fabulous model for somebody that wants to continue living with a family the rest of their life or for a number of years. But it's going to take time to find that family match. Jack said that, and you need to be prepared for that. If you think that they're going to find a match overnight, that's not going to happen unless it's by luck. And so it's going to take time to plan. And then living independently, oh my gosh, it is going to take a lot of time to plan. I mean, think about how complicated that is. You know, staffing budgets, if it's supported living, affordable rent, roommates, furniture, it's complicated. And so taking time and planning for it and preparing for it is just really, really important. All right. So this is where I'm kind of circling back to, you know, well, suppose I'm not eligible for Regional Center, and why I spent so much time on those eligibility issues up front. Because honestly, if you're eligible for Regional Center, you are going to have a lot more resources available to you. You're going to have a service coordinator to help with planning. That service coordinator is going to have resource teams to help identify resources. You're going to have vendor service providers that are going to be able to help with independent living or supported living. And so the first question I'll ask for you, like if you were in my office and we were talking, are you really sure you're not eligible? Have you really applied? And it wouldn't be accusations. It would be those questions I was asking earlier. It's like, what was your experience? I mean, did you really go through a process, be considered for one of the eligible areas of developmental disability? Did you provide reports that were accurate and accurately reflected the area of disability, limitations that would support eligibility? Because if you're not sure you went through that process, or did you go through that process when your loved one was really young, 3, 5, 7 years old, but as they became an adult, it became more apparent they had greater deficits. These are the types of questions I would ask, because the first thing I would want for you is to be eligible for a lot of the great resources that Regional Center has and provides. If you're not eligible for Regional Center, it's not going to be easy. I'll be honest with you, and you need to be prepared for it's not going to be easy. But that doesn't mean there aren't resources and things you can do that will help. And so I would then advocate to pursue all eligible resources, because even if you're not eligible for Regional Center, you're likely eligible for supplemental security income through Social Security. You're likely to be eligible for medical benefits through CalOptima. And you want those resources. I mean, that SSI is going to help for rent and living expenses. CalOptima, if your medical needs are covered by insurance, CalOptima, then that's something that is paid for, and it's a great resource. You're going to want to apply for Section 8 housing, and it may take years to get Section 8 housing, but you're going to want to apply for it as soon as you're eligible, because at some point it's going to lead to more affordable housing, and you don't have to have Regional Center for Section 8 housing. In-home support services. A lot of folks at Regional Center have in-home support services, but there's a lot of people that don't have Regional Center that have in-home support services. These are services that can help support a loved one living independently. And so you want to apply for those. If you're going to live on your own, employment, you want a job, you want to bring in some extra income, Department of Rehabilitation and pursuing employment is going to help. So these are resources that I would definitely encourage you to apply for. And then here are some other thoughts and ideas. If your loved one's not eligible for Regional Center, well, if they have an eligible diagnosis for Regional Center, but they're not eligible for a Regional Center because they legitimately do not have the deficits to make them eligible, well, first of all, that's not bad news. That means that your loved one has a lot of great skills. And so thinking creatively and out of the box, and I'm really it's a lot of ideas, but I would be throwing things on the table and brainstorming with you. First of all, there are room and boards out there where they can use their SSI to pay for rent. They'll get a meal a day. There's somebody that's kind of in their life, not really providing supervision, but is around. It could be a good option. Not always easy to find room and boards, but it could be an option. Renting a room from somebody could be a really good, more affordable option. There are County of Orange mental health facilities. So if somebody has a mental health disability, there are facilities and services and wraparound services and things for folks with mental health services. In my opinion, nowhere near as good as the Regional Center, but they're out there. Another thought is becoming friends with people who are eligible for Regional Center. And that may sound funny, but think this through a little bit. Okay, I'm not eligible for Regional Center, but some of my friends that I went to school with are eligible for Regional Center. Maybe I can be their roommate, and that's going to help with costs. And we can share rent. I might benefit from the services they're getting. Now, Regional Center is not going to pay an independent living agency to provide services to your loved one if your loved one isn't eligible for Regional Center. But if your roommate is receiving independent living skills services from another agency, they sure are going to have the opportunity to benefit from watching staff for the agency serve their roommate. And you know what? Most independent living services staff that I know are really friendly. And like if they're showing, one roommate how to cook and the other one's there watching, hey, come on into the kitchen, I'll show you how to. Doesn't take them any extra time, right? So there's some shared benefits that could be there. And then, the possibility, this may sound funny when I first say it, but your loved one becoming staff for an independent living agency, if they don't have the skills deficits they need to become eligible for regional center, they may really need a significant support structure to help them be successful, but they may also have some skills to support somebody else living in their own apartment. Maybe they move into the apartment and provide support to a roommate. So those are some creative thoughts if you don't have regional center. Judy referred to the book that Linda O'Neill, Casey, Susan, and I wrote, Conversation with Parents. It's free. There's a link that you can access and download for free and share for free, and please do. And Judy, I actually made a couple changes while we were listening to Jack, so I'm going to need to send you a slightly modified version so you can share that with everybody. And then there should be active links in the product that I share with you.
Thank you.
So I am going to stop sharing. And I think this is the point where Jack and I entertain questions, right?